The auctioneer's voice carried across the dusty square like a vulture's cry, harsh and hungry against the relentless blue of the Wyoming sky. July heat shimmered above the wooden platform where she stood, a slip of a girl no more than 17, blindfolded with a strip of faded calico, her wrists bound before her with rough hemp rope. Her dress, once white perhaps, had yellowed with travel and time, yet still hung with a certain dignity from shoulders narrow as a child's. She did not cry, she did not speak. Only the slight tremble of her lower lip betrayed that she was anything more than a statue carved from pale marble. "Orphaned on the trail from Boston," the auctioneer announced, tugging at his sweat-stained collar. "Father dead of cholera. Mother took fever 3 weeks back. No relations, no claims. Educated, they say. Reads and writes. Healthy stock. Knows her letters and numbers. Make a fine housekeeper or whatever else suits your fancy, gents." The laughter that followed held all the warmth of a rattlesnake smile. Isaiah Miller watched from the shadow of the livery stable, the bitter taste of coffee gone cold on his tongue. 20 years a carpenter in Sweetwater, his calloused hands testifying to honest labor, and still the town surprised him with its capacity for cruelty. The girl swayed slightly in the heat, like a sapling in an unseen breeze. No one in the gathering crowd showed any sign of decency, just the hungry eyes of men who'd forgotten what it meant to be men. "Starting bid is $15, called the auctioneer, scanning the crowd with greedy eyes. "Who will give 15 for this fine young woman? Think of the cooking, the cleaning, the company in these long winter months." Isaiah's throat tightened. These auctions, they call them orphan auctions to maintain a veneer of legality, were nothing but thinly disguised trafficking sometimes. Rarely, a good family would take in an orphan, treat them as their own. More often the outcomes were far darker. $15, called a voice from the back. Harlan Briggs, owner of the saloon, a man whose eyes held all the compassion of empty bullet casings. 20, countered another, the blacksmith's eldest, a boy with too much of his father's meanness and none of his skill. The bidding continued, the price climbing as the girl stood motionless, only the rise and fall of her chest suggesting she lived at all. The blindfold was damp now, whether from sweat or tears, Isaiah couldn't tell. What he could see was the whiteness of her knuckles, the small fists clenched so tight they might have been carved from bone. "Do I hear $35 for this fine girl?" 40, called Briggs. 45, the blacksmith's boy. Isaiah felt the weight of his purse against his thigh. $37 and changed the payment for crafting Mayor Wilson's new writing desk. Not enough. Yet the alternative stretched before him like a vista of shadowed canyons. Going once for 45. Going twice, $50. The words escaped Isaiah's lips before he'd fully formed the thought. A silence fell across the square, heavy as an anvil. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Isaiah Miller, the quiet carpenter, the man who attended church regular but spoke to almost no one. The widower who'd buried his Ellen 7 years past and lived alone in the small house behind his workshop that Isaiah Miller had bid $50 on the girl. "Well now," the auctioneer drawled, surprise giving way to a veriswe. "Have 50 for Mr. Miller. Do I hear fit?" Briggs turned, eyes narrow as a blade's edge. "Didn't figure you for that type, Miller." Isaiah stepped forward, into the cruel light of the midday sun. "I'm not 50 going once," the auctioneer called, looking toward Briggs, who merely shrugged and turned away. 50 going twice. Sold to Isaiah Miller for $50. The crowd parted as Isaiah approached the platform, fishing in his pocket for money he could ill afford to spend. The transaction complete, the auctioneer thrust the girl forward like a sack of grain. Isaiah caught her gently by the elbow as she stumbled on the steps. "May I remove your blindfold, miss?" he asked softly. She nodded, a barely perceptible movement. With fingers accustomed to the delicate work of inlay and joinery, Isaiah untied the knot at the back of her head. The cloth fell away, and for the first time, he saw her eyes gray as winter rain, alert with intelligence and wariness in equal measure. "My name is Isaiah Miller. I'm a carpenter. You'll have a room of your own with a lock on the inside of the door. I'll not harm you." Her gaze held his, searching for deception. "Why?" A single word, rough as if unpracticed. "My Ellen would never have forgiven me if I'd done otherwise," he answered simply. "Come along now. You look in need of a meal and rest." She followed, her steps uncertain, still bound at the wrists. The crowd watched their departure with the collective disappointment of denied entertainment. Only when they'd reached the edge of the square did Isaiah stop to cut her bonds with his pocket knife. "I don't know your name," he said. "Emma," she replied, rubbing her chafed wrists. "Emma Thorne. Well, Miss Thorne, I've just spent every cent I have on you, and I expect nothing in return except perhaps some help around the workshop if you're willing. The rest of your life remains your own." For the first time, something like hope flickered across her face, brief as lightning on a summer horizon, but unmistakable. "I can cook," she offered, "and so I can earn my keep." Isaiah nodded. "That's a start, but first, rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to decide what comes next." As they walked the dusty street toward his modest home, Isaiah felt the weight of curious eyes upon them. By nightfall, the speculation would race through Sweetwater like wildfire. He would be judged, condemned perhaps. The girl face scrutiny and whispers. The path ahead would not be easy, but as the late afternoon light gilded the distant mountains, Isaiah found he didn't much care what the town thought. Some choices were between a man and his conscience alone. Chapter 2. The whispers. 3 days passed like shadows across the sun, quiet, inevitable, and fleeting. Emma moved through Isaiah's small home with the watchfulness of prey. Her fingers traced the furniture he had crafted, each dovetail joint, each hand-carved detail, while her eyes remained fixed on doors and windows, mapping escape routes. She slept behind the locked door he had promised her, emerging at dawn to kindle the fire and prepare simple meals that grew more flavorful as she discovered his modest pantry. They spoke little. Words hung between them like unfinished timber, and full of possibility, yet lacking shape. Isaiah worked in his shop, the rhythm of his tools, the rasp of saw against pine, the measured tap of hammer on nail forming a language of its own. Sometimes he would look up to find her watching from the doorway, her gray eyes assessing his movements as if reading text in a foreign tongue. "My father was a furniture maker in Boston," she said on the fourth morning, standing at the threshold of his workshop, sunlight catching in her dark hair. The first personal detail she had offered, delivered like a gift, both precious and fragile. Isaiah nodded, setting aside his plane. "Is that so? He taught me to recognize good work." Her eyes drifted to the rocking chair taking shape beneath his hands. "Yours is better than his. He would have envied your joints." Compliment from this careful girl was no small thing. Isaiah accepted it with a slight incline of his head. "Would you like to try your hand? The wood remembers what it's taught." For it. A moment, something like yearning crossed her face before she shook her head. "Women don't build furniture." "Perhaps not in Boston," Isaiah replied, returning to his work. "But Sweetwater has different rules, and my workshop has only one. Respect the wood for what it might become." She didn't approach that day, but the next morning found her hesitantly running her fingers along the edge of his workbench while he measured and marked a length of cherry destined to become a cradle for the blacksmith's daughter, the daughter of the same man whose son had bid on Emma. The irony wasn't lost on Isaiah. The town's reaction arrived with Mrs. Abernathy, president of the Ladies' Aid Society and self-appointed guardian of Sweetwater's moral character. She appeared at the door precisely at 4 in the afternoon, when respectable visits could be made without suggesting undue familiarity. "Mr. Miller," she announced, lips pinched as if holding back floodwaters, "the society has concerns." Isaiah gestured to his small sitting room, watching as Mrs. Abernathy perched on the edge of his sofa like a hawk preparing to strike. Emma had vanished at the first knacker skill she seemed to have perfected. "Mrs. Abernathy, this isn't a social call." Her gloves remained firmly on her hands. "It's about the girl." "Miss Thorne," Isaiah corrected gently. "Emma Thorne." "Yes, well." Mrs. Abernathy's mouth tightened further. "A man in your position, widowed, living alone, it simply isn't proper to have an unmarried young woman residing under your roof. People are talking, Mr. Miller." Isaiah's hands, calloused and steady, rested on his knees. "People generally do, Mrs. Abernathy, especially when they lack occupation for their minds." Color rose in the woman's cheeks. "This isn't about idle gossip. It's about propriety, about protecting that girl's reputation, what's left of it." "And what would you suggest?" Isaiah asked, his voice level as a well-planed board. "Should I have left her to Harlan Briggs? Or perhaps the blacksmith's boy? The society would have taken up a collection, found her a suitable position in a respectable household after the auction." Isaiah interrupted. "Not before." Mrs. Abernathy's silence was answer enough. "Miss Thorne has a room of her own. She has safety and honest work if she chooses it. I've made no demands and harbor no improper intentions." Isaiah stood, signaling the end of the conversation. If the society wishes to help, perhaps they might call upon Miss Thorne themselves, bring her into the company of women, offer her friendship rather than judgment. That would seem to validate this arrangement. Mrs. Abernathy rose, clutching her reticule like a shield. "It would seem to offer Christian charity to an orphaned girl," Isaiah countered. "But I leave that to your conscience, ma'am." After she departed, Emma emerged from the shadow of the hallway. "They think I'm your—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "People believe what fits their understanding of the world," Isaiah replied, returning to his workshop. "Truth has little bearing on such matters." That evening, as summer twilight hung suspended between day and night, stretching shadows across the land like molasses, they sat on the small porch behind the house. The distant mountains were silhouetted against the fading light, sentinels watching over the valley with ancient indifference. "Why did you really buy me?" Emma asked, the question falling between them like a stone into still water. Isaiah considered the truth, weighing it for sharp edges that might cut this fragile trust growing between them. "I had a daughter," he said finally. "She'd be about your age now." Emma waited, hearing the story hidden beneath his words. "Scarlet fever took her and my Ellen within 3 days of each other. Spring of '66. He rarely spoke of it to the empty rooms, the tiny grave beside her mother's, the dresses he couldn't bear to give away. I couldn't save them, so I'm redemption." Her voice held no accusation, only quiet understanding. "No, Miss Thorne, you're your own self. I just couldn't stand by again when there was something I might do." The silence between them expanded, comfortable as an old quilt. "I wasn't always Emma Thorne," she said eventually, watching the first stars emerge. "I was Emma Caldwell before my mother remarried, before Boston, before the cholera." Isaiah nodded, accepting this fragment of her past without demand for more. "They died so quickly," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "One day planning our new life in Wyoming territory, the next," her hands twisted in her lap. "The wagon master said he'd find me a place when we reached Sweetwater. I didn't know he meant the auction block." "What was your father's workshop like?" Isaiah asked, steering toward gentler waters. A small smile touched her lips. "Sawdust everywhere," Mother complained endlessly. "He made ship's furniture, mostly compact pieces for captain's quarters, beautiful inlaid work with exotic woods from the voyages." As night fully claimed the sky, they sat in the growing darkness, to survivors finding brief sanctuary in shared solitude. Behind them, the town of Sweetwater hummed with speculation and judgment. Before them stretched an uncertain future. But in that moment, on the humble porch of a carpenter's home, there existed a fragile piece built from the simplest materials, honesty and respect. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadow of the barn, the ember of a cigarette, briefly illuminating the hard eyes of Harlan Briggs before he turned and melted into the darkness. Chapter 3. The storm August arrived with bruised skies and air thick enough to cut with a saw. Thunder muttered on the horizon like an old man's grievances, while the townsfolk of Sweetwater hurried to secure loose shutters and bring in laundry from sagging lines. The rain, when it came, would be a mercy and a fury, both breaking the heat while threatening to wash away the parched earth unprepared for sudden abundance. In the workshop behind his house, Isaiah guided Emma's hands as she sanded the curved arm of the rocking chair. 6 weeks had passed since the auction. Her wrists had healed, though sometimes she still rubbed them absently, as if feeling phantom bonds. "With the grain," he reminded her, his voice soft beneath the whisper of wood surrendering to sandpaper. "Always with the grain." She nodded, her movements growing more confident. The girl who had arrived with nothing now wore a calico dress sewn by her own hands from fabric purchased with the first wages Isaiah had insisted on paying her. Her hair, once lank with dust and despair, now caught the lantern light in waves secured at the nape of her neck with a simple wooden clasp he had carved for her. "Mr. Miller," she began, then stopped, a question balanced on her tongue like a penny on edge. "Isaiah," he corrected, as he had a dozen times before. "Isaiah." She tried again, the name still awkward in her mouth after years of proper Boston formality. "The harvest dance is on Saturday," his hands stilled on the lathe. The harvest dance, Sweetwater's grand tradition marking summer's end and the beginning of autumn's work. A celebration of survival, of community, of life's persistence in this harsh country. He had not attended since Elon's passing. "Mrs. Abernathy called yesterday when you were delivering the Peterson cabinet," Emma continued, eyes fixed on her sanding. "She said the Ladies' Aid Society would like me to help with the refreshments, that it would be appropriate for me to participate." The unspoken question hung between them. Was this acceptance, or merely closer surveillance? "Do you want to go?" Isaiah asked, watching her profile in the golden workshop light. "I think," she set down the sandpaper, brushing wood dust from her fingers. "I think I need to face them sometime, better on my terms than theirs." A crack of thunder punctuated her declaration. Closer now, the storm approaching just as Emma was finding her courage. "Then we'll go," Isaiah said simply. The bell above the workshop door jangled, harsh in the quiet afternoon. Harlan Briggs stood in the doorway, hat in hand but menace in his stance. The saloon owner's presence filled the small space like smoke, acrid and unwelcome. "Miller," he nodded curtly. "Miss Thorne." Emma's spine straightened, her chin lifting. Imperceptibly, Isaiah moved slightly, positioning himself between them with the casual precision of a man adjusting a level. "What can I do for you, Briggs?" His tone remained even, though his hand drifted to rest near the drawknife on his workbench. "Need a new bar-top oak, something that'll stand up to spilled whiskey and the occasional knife." Briggs's eyes never left Emma. "My customers are hard on furniture." Isaiah recognized the request for what it was, not a genuine commission but an excuse for Briggs to inspect what he still considered a missed opportunity. The man had been circling for weeks, sending drinks to Isaiah at church socials, asking pointed questions about his arrangement with Emma. "I'm afraid I'm booked through November," Isaiah replied. "Henderson over in Bitter Creek might have the time." Briggs smiled, teeth gleaming like a wolf's in moonlight. "Shame, I was hoping to give Miss Thorne here a chance to see where the real money is in Sweetwater. The saloon's doing well, expanding even, always looking for pretty faces to serve drinks. Pays better than sanding wood, I'd wager." "I prefer honest labor," Emma answered before Isaiah could speak, her voice steady despite the pallor of her face. "And what's dishonest about pouring whiskey, girl?" Briggs chuckled, the sound as dry as autumn leaves. "Unless you think I'm offering something else." The tension stretched between them, taut as piano wire. Outside, the first heavy drops of rain struck the roof like bullets. "I believe you've had your answer, Mr. Briggs," Isaiah said quietly, "both to your commission and your implied offer." Briggs replaced his hat with deliberate slowness. Just being neighborly, Miller should know all her options. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Heard you're coming to the dance. Looking forward to seeing you both there. Town's mighty curious about how you two are getting along. The door closed behind him just as the skies opened, rain lashing down in sheets. Isaiah moved to secure the shutters while Emma lit another lantern against the sudden darkness. He won't stop, she said, her voice nearly lost beneath the storm's fury. Isaiah watched her face in the lamplight, seeing not fear but resolve hardening in her eyes like amber preserving something precious. No, he agreed. Men like Briggs rarely do. The storm raged outside, but within the workshop, they returned to their tasks, Seema to her sanding, Isaiah to his measurements, each drawing strength from the quiet determination of the other, preparing in their own way for the battles that lay ahead. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The harvest dance transformed the Sweetwater meeting hall into something almost beautiful. Coal oil lamps hung from rough-hewn beams, their light softening the hard edges of frontier life. Maple leaves and corn husks adorned every available surface, nature's gold against whitewashed walls. A three-piece band, fiddle, guitar, and harmonica played melodies that spoke of places left behind, of memories carried west like precious cargo. Isaiah adjusted his collar for the third time, uncomfortable in his Sunday best. He had forgotten how to navigate such gatherings, a dance of conversation, the careful positioning of bodies in social space. Emma stood beside him at the entrance, her green dress simple but elegantly altered from one of the Ladies' Aid Society's donations. Mrs. Abernathy had been true to her word, including Emma in the preparations. Whether from genuine charity or desire to observe her more closely remained unclear. We don't have to stay long, Isaiah murmured as heads turned toward them. Emma's hand found his arm, steadying herself as much as him. Yes, we do. They entered the circle of light and judgment. Conversation faltered, then resumed at a higher pitch. The minister approached first, hand extended in Christian welcome that barely masked his curiosity. Miller, good to see you here again. Been too long. His gaze shifted to Emma. And Miss Thorne, the pies you sent over looked delicious. Others followed cautious greetings, measured smiles, questions that probed without appearing to. Isaiah watched Emma navigate each encounter with unexpected grace, answering inquiries about her baking and sewing while deftly avoiding those that strayed toward her past or her arrangement with the carpenter. She was neither apologetic nor defiant, simply present, claiming her right to exist in this space. Across the room, Harlan Briggs held court near the punch bowl, whiskey flask glinting as he surreptitiously docked at his cup. His eyes tracked Emma's movements like a hawk studying a meadowlark. May I have this dance, Miss Thorne? The question came from young Thomas Hayes, the shopkeeper's son, barely 20 and blushing furiously beneath his carefully combed hair. Emma hesitated, glancing at Isaiah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I'd be delighted. Isaiah watched them join the other couples as the fiddle began a Virginia reel. Emma moved with surprising lightness, her face illuminated by something he had rarely seen, simple joy in the moment. The sight lodged in his chest like a warm coal, both painful and precious. Quite the little lady you've shaped her into, came Briggs's voice, suddenly beside him. The saloon owner's breath carried the sweet reek of bourbon, always did have an eye for potential. She shaped herself, Isaiah replied evenly, not granting Briggs the satisfaction of his full attention. I merely provided safe harbor. Briggs chuckled. At what you call it. The whole town knows what a man wants with a pretty young thing living under his roof. No need to dress it up with fancy talk. Isaiah's hands tightened, knuckles whitening. 7 years a widower had taught him to swallow many insults. But this struck too close to Emma's dignity, too near the trust they had carefully cultivated. Careful, Briggs, he said quietly. That's dangerously close to slander. Truth's a defense against slander, Briggs countered, sipping his enhanced punch. And the truth is, you bought yourself. At the rest of his sentence disappeared beneath the sudden discordant squeal of the fiddle as the dance ended. Couples separated, applauding the musicians. Emma made her way back through the crowd, cheeks flushed with exertion. Mr. Miller, she smiled, using the formality appropriate for the public setting. The band is playing a waltz next. Would you honor me? Before Isaiah could respond, Briggs stepped forward. The lady deserves a proper dance partner, someone with 2 good feet. Isaiah's old injury, a badly set break from a workshop accident years before, was rarely noticeable except in his slight hesitation on uneven ground. That Briggs would use it now, publicly, revealed the depth of his malice. Emma's smile vanished. Her eyes, meeting Isaiah's, held a silent question. The crowded rooms seemed to contract around them, the moment suspended like a held breath. In that pause, Isaiah saw what Emma was offering, not just a dance, but a declaration, a choice made in full view of Sweetwater's most judgmental eyes. I'd be honored, Miss Thorne, Isaiah said, taking her outstretched hand, though I fear for your toes. As he led her to the dance floor, Briggs's voice followed, touching Miller, real touching. Wonder if you'll still be dancing when certain telegrams I've sent receive their answers. Isaiah faltered, But Emma's hand tightened on his. "One thing at a time," she whispered, placing his hand at her waist as the waltz began. "First, we dance." And so they did, turning slowly among the other couples, his limp barely noticeable as she adjusted her steps to his. In the warm light of the harvest dance, surrounded by whispers both kind and cruel, the carpenter and the girl from the auction moved in careful harmony, neither leading nor following, but supporting step by step, turn by turn, finding their way together through the music and beyond.